I like to start with a story of my guest. I'll let you share your journey in your own words, how you became an ambassador.
After graduate school, I applied for the Foreign Service. I took the Foreign Service written exam and then the oral exam and was lucky enough to pass those and started up what was turned out to be a 31-year career, really serving all over the world, starting in Nigeria, but then I worked a lot in the Middle East for quite a number of years and then shifted over to Asia, where I was first the deputy ambassador in India, then I was ambassador in Sri Lanka, as you said, and then I went back into the State Department to be head of the whole South and Central Asia region under Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and did that for 4.5 years, quite a long time. And then my last job was in as ambassador to Indonesia. One of the really important things to do is to get the facts about what's happening. You know, if there's been a bombing, let's say, nearby, oftentimes the first reports that come out are wildly exaggerated or just plain wrong. So it's important to get somebody out to the scene as quickly as possible.
Hey, let's welcome Robert Blake Jr., former ambassador to Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives, who now serves as the senior managing director at McClarty Associates. Welcome to the show, sir, and good to see you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. Hey guys, I want to tell you about something you need to check out. It's called Memora. My friend is the founder. This project lets families preserve the voices of their loved ones, whether they've passed away, are living with a terminal illness, or may one day lose their speech. Listen to this sample.
Hi, sweetheart. If you're hearing this, I want you to know how much I love you. You were the best.
Don't wait until it's too late. Protect the voices that matter most. Click the link in the description to learn more and get started today.
Sure. Well, I grew up overseas, actually. My dad was a Foreign Service officer in the State Department. So I lived mostly in Africa when I was younger and went to a lot of American schools. And when I was in college, I did quite a lot of traveling and was a travel writer for a group called Let's Go Europe, which is a popular student travel guide. And I just really loved being overseas. And so, of course, of those many years and experiences, I had a lot of opportunities to mentor the people who worked for me. And so I'll be glad to talk about that.
Sure. And just curious, since you shared this part about being born overseas, how does the law work in terms of citizenship and those kinds of things? Because I imagine if your parents were Americans who work for the government and you were born overseas, you're still technically a U.S. born citizen,
Correct.
or how does that?
Correct. Although technically, I was actually born in Washington, D.C. My parents moved to Tunisia about 2 weeks after I was born, but I was born.
Yeah.
So my sister was born in Tunisia, and she, automatically becomes an American citizen because my dad was serving for the U.S. government overseas. So it's not an issue.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so you served in different regions from Africa to Asia, Indonesia. Was it hard to adapt and understand these different cultures? Maybe one of them was the hardest to connect with, or what was your journey on that front?
Really, for me, not so much because I, again, growing up overseas, had done a lot of traveling on my own. So, the adapting part of it wasn't so hard. But as with any new job, you've got to dive right in and make a lot of new contacts and, figure out the local situation as quickly as possible. So, but, that's one thing I think that we at the State Department get quite good at is learning fast on the job and adapting quickly.
So, as an, let's say, ambassador to Indonesia, or your other roles across your career, what were the main things that you had to do day to day just to better understand your career, your life, and what it takes to be an ambassador and work
Sure.
for the State Department?
Well, our main job is to advance American interests and to promote, for example, American business, to obviously work on peace and security issues wherever those exist, to help American citizens, particularly when they get in trouble. If there's, for example, a coup or if there's riots and demonstrations that might affect them, we put out notices to the American community on the web and sometimes on text messages if people register for them. So, providing security information is one of the most important things that we do. In extreme circumstances where the situation is really deteriorating fast, we will advise Americans to leave the country. And in some cases, we actually provide assistance to do that if they've waited too long or if the situation has changed so rapidly that their commercial aircraft are no longer flying out of the country and things like that. So being a Foreign Service officer in the State Department is a really interesting job, and you do a lot of different kinds of work, and every day is different. And that's why I loved being there, and of course the opportunity to serve your country.
And let's talk about mentorship. You mentioned that you had an opportunity to mentor a lot of people who worked with you along the way. How important is mentorship, and what it taught you, and what it gave you in your career?
Mentorship is absolutely essential. In the course of my 31-year career, I had the privilege to work with some of the great leaders and mentors of the Foreign Service, and I learned a lot from them. And one of the things I learned was the importance of giving back to my own subordinates when I got to a more senior level. And, I'll just give you one maybe story that kind of talks about that. After I became a senior Foreign Service officer, I served in Washington on the committee that recommended lists of qualified new deputy ambassadors to incoming ambassadors, and then they could choose from a list of 5 people. And so that was a pretty important committee, and it was chaired by the deputy secretary, who at that time was a wonderful guy called Rich Armitage. He was Secretary Powell's deputy, and he was, like Secretary Powell, a wonderful career military guy. So they knew a lot about taking care of their people and of their troops, and talked a lot about that. And in that committee, the one question that he always asked about candidates that were being considered was not how smart they were or what awards or distinctions they had earned, but how he or she treated his or her people. And I really, took that to mind. And he considered that kind of the biggest test of how good a leader and how good a manager people would be. And so later on, when I became assistant secretary for the Bureau of South and Central Asia, I had a huge staff. I had 8 offices in the State Department that reported to me. I had 11 embassies overseas that were reporting to me. I had, hundreds and hundreds of Americans in each of those places reporting to me. And so, obviously mentorship was a really, really important thing. And so I did a variety of things to try to, provide advice for particularly the younger officers who were working for me. So, for example, in the State Department itself, each country has what we call country desk officers, and they're kind of responsible for managing our relations with each of these countries and coordinating our policy with all of the other relevant agencies, with the Department of Defense, with the Department of Treasury, the Department of Commerce, with the Department of Homeland Security, et cetera. And so, every year I would have a brown bag lunch for all of the new desk officers. And I would hand out a little piece of paper and I'd say, here are the things that I think are really the habits of good desk officers and the things that I think will help you ensure your success in this bureau and the things that I'd love to see you do. And so we would talk about that. And then, they followed that to the letter. They were very good about that. And they really appreciated it. And there were simple things, but there were things like, be a team player. Every desk has got crises of one sort or another. And when another desk has got a crisis, take a little bit of your own time to help them. And then when there's a crisis in your country, somebody will do the same for you. Likewise, I told them not to play bureaucratic games. If you have a policy disagreement with another bureau, let's say the Human Rights Bureau or another bureau, don't cut them out of the process, but try to resolve it at your level. And if you can't, then to kick it up to the next level. I told them that I wanted to make sure that they coordinated as much as possible with the embassies, where, let's say if you were the Tunisia desk officer, it's very important for you to coordinate your activities with our embassy in Tunis. And then probably the most important thing for them was something about judging the right thing to do, because, you have a lot of, we want you to take the initiative, but we want to do things that are not going to get yourself in trouble. So one of the tests that I told them I used to apply to myself was the Washington Post test. If a reporter later called me up about some policy that I had devised, and asked me, why I did it, I should be able to have a good response to that. And if I didn't have a good response, then probably it wasn't a very good idea to begin with. And then towards the end of my tour, I did a separate sort of much longer paper of 5 pages or so on sort of leadership and management things that I had learned over the course of my career. And then when I traveled and went to embassies, I would take the time to meet with the staffs there and share some of those things that I'd learned, about leadership and management, importance of setting mutually agreed goals at the beginning of each work cycle, the importance of leaders dealing with problems right away and not allowing them to fester, the importance of taking the time to recognize and reward good performance and credit your subordinates as much as possible. Don't take credit yourself, but as much as possible, credit others. Of course, treat others as you want to be treated yourself. Things like that. And again, people really appreciated those things. And I would spend an hour or two with them over a lunch or whatever, and just kind of be as open and as share as much possible from my own experiences.
Yeah, it's a great leadership philosophy. And I had a chance to talk with several US Army generals, retired and even active duty. And it seems like your leadership style is very similar to what we have in the military as well. And I didn't realize how close they are in terms of, the organization and people like you who were or are leading people and employees and embassies and State Department. It's almost like in the military. It doesn't have to do with the guns. You prefer diplomacy over military action, but essentially the organization, the structure, and the leadership is quite similar. Is that right?
That's right. Absolutely. After all, we're all in the same business. We want to, again, advance American interests, and we want to do that to the best of our ability and to do that in an efficient way, in an ethical way, and in a way that the American public can be proud of. And so that's what we would try to inculcate in our teams.
And over the span of your career, you probably had a few times where you were in the middle of chaos or uncertainty and you had to make very important and very tough decisions within a limited time frame. How do you deal with those kinds of things, and how you stay grounded and make the right decisions in those
Right.
circumstances?
That's a great question. And it's a really important question because every Foreign Service officer serves in danger posts at one point or another in their career. And I served in several of those in the course of my career. And I think one lesson is, first of all, to stay cool under pressure. Don't panic. One of the really important things to do is to get the facts about what's happening. If been a bombing, let's say, nearby, oftentimes the first reports that come out are wildly exaggerated or just plain wrong. So it's important to get somebody out to the scene as quickly as possible, often a local employee who's going to sort of blend in a little bit and talk to the local police. We always have good contacts with the local police. And again, find out exactly what has happened. And then, as I said, our first obligation is to American citizens, both our own staff, but also the American citizens, the business people and the people at the American school, if there is one, and others who rely on our information. And really, the American embassy in most cities is considered usually the best source of information about what is going on, because we really do take the time to find out what's going on and to give our best advice about what parts of the city to avoid, what actions they should take to protect themselves and their families. Sometimes you want to just stay in place wherever you are until kind of things settle. In some cases, it's so bad already that you have to start making evacuation plans, and we advise on that. But again, a very, very important thing is to stay cool, establish a little team that will not only provide reports to you and as ambassador about what's going on a hour by hour basis, but also establish a little log of what actions you've taken, what things have been reported, because oftentimes later on you're going to have to respond to congressional requests about what happened, what did you do, and so forth. So again, those are things you learn over time. But the main thing is to stay cool under pressure and trust your team and make sure that they're all getting the information and then sharing the information as much as possible.
And do you receive some kind of training before you go to those foreign countries, because again, there are certain parallels that one can draw with the military, and it's not easy to stay cool under pressure and deal with all those kinds of things and not panic. So how does the State Department make sure that you're prepared to serve in those roles before you go there?
We do have training for that kind of thing. And every embassy has what's called an emergency action plan. And in that plan is how you would respond to various kinds of crises. And, every country is different. In some cases, you're in countries where there's a lot of earthquakes or maybe tsunamis or things like that. So you need to have a separate plan on that. When I was in the embassy in India, we were very concerned about potential tensions between India and Pakistan, two nuclear weapons powered countries. So we had a little bit of a plan about that. What would be in the worst case scenario? How would we deal with that? So, we're always like the military, thinking ahead and trying to figure out what we would do so that when the time comes, you could sort of consult your plan and make sure you're doing all the things that you've thought about in advance. The other important thing I should say is to report back to Washington. So we all learned very quickly that the very first thing you do when you found out about something and you've gotten the basic information is you call back to the State Department. There's something called the Operations Center, which is a 24/7 group up on the 7th floor, on the top floor of the State Department. They are there to monitor worldwide developments, and then you will call into that group, and then they will in turn disseminate information to senior officials in the State Department, but sometimes also to, again, other concerned agencies like the Department of Defense and, of course, the White House. So there's a whole kind of chain of things that you learn to do.
And once you've retired from the department, was it tough to transition into the civilian world and then, the corporate America, and how you applied your skills over your many decades of your career into your new role in the corporate American world?
Honestly, it wasn't that difficult because the group that I work for, McClarty Associates, our main job is to help American businesses to first expand into new countries, to expand their businesses, but also to deal with problems in existing countries. And that's exactly what we did as State Department officers and as ambassadors. So it was a very easy and comfortable transition for me. Honestly, the hardest thing was just leaving the State Department, which I regretted a lot because there's really no place else where you can get the variety of work and the opportunity to serve your country in so many different ways. And when you're an ambassador, there are umpteen things that you do every single day. And so it's just such interesting work. And again, such a privilege to be able to serve our country.
And probably growing up overseas has had influence on you in this context. But did you miss living in the US while serving overseas? Because, yes, you are serving your country. And again, just like in the military, when you're deployed somewhere for a few years, you have to stay there. To me, this would be like the biggest downside is because you're away from the US and you're not there. So did you have moments where you missed the US and wanted to come back, but you had to stay there?
I'd answer that in two ways. First of all, when you go to most embassies around the world, your family goes with you. So, your spouse and your children accompany you, and the State Department pays for that. And they provide housing for you, of course, and they help, with getting you into the American schools, if there are some, or appropriate other schools. So there's a very good support network for you and your family when you arrive. And then in every embassy, you also take home leave every year. You get the chance to go back to the United States to spend time with your family, usually for a couple of weeks, and check in with your parents or friends or whatever. So you have a home leave address, and again, the State Department will pay for that. The only exception to that is when you're in danger posts. So, for example, I was for 1 year I served in Algiers in the early 90s, and there were a lot of armed Islamic groups that were operating in Algeria, and they oftentimes were targeting the United States with car bombs and guns and all kinds of things. So our embassy drew down to a very, very small number of people, and I was one of them. And there, you're of course much more restricted in what you can do. You cannot bring your family, and so and it's of course can be challenging. There's daily security issues, and so they give you the opportunity to get out every couple of months to someplace nearby just to sort of take a breather. And then you only serve for a year because you're not with your family, and they recognize that is a hardship for you and for them. So that's the one exception where your families don't want to accompany you to your post.
Yeah, that's very interesting insights. And before we wrap up the episode, do you have some advice for young people that you want to share?
Well, first of all, I do hope that people will consider public service. As I say, it's a wonderful opportunity to serve your country. And the State Department, I loved all of the different experiences that I had. And then, in terms of mentorship, I would just say, the best managers and leaders are people, first of all, who are humble and sort of downplay their own accomplishments and do their best to play up those of their team, and, take the time to credit subordinates for jobs well done. Don't take credit yourself. Again, as I said, stay cool under pressure and, work with your team on all those things. Lead by example, of course. When you're an ambassador, everybody looks up to you, and they every single thing that you do, they want to copy your example. So it's important to treat everybody with respect and dignity, and, uphold the highest ethical standards, and never ask people to do things or make sacrifices that you yourself have not already done yourself. So, and then, of course, as I said earlier, deal with problems right away. Don't allow them to fester. Be decisive. Welcome new ideas from all corners of your organization, particularly from younger people, which I think is important today with in this age of AI. Young people have so much to contribute, and oftentimes they're not consulted. And maybe the last one is give people who make mistakes a second chance. We all make mistakes, and it's important to explain as a supervisor and as a mentor what the mistake was and how to correct it so it doesn't happen again. But don't ruin their careers because of it. Give them a second chance. Of course, if there's a pattern, then that is a problem. And you'll get a lot of loyalty out of your team if you do all the things I just talked about.
Well, I appreciate your advice and all of your stories that you shared today. A great podcast, great conversation, and I'm looking forward to putting in public. And yeah, thank you, sir, again for joining today.
Thank you, Danny. It's a pleasure.